Hello, my name is Mike Pfaff, and this is my YouTube channel, Living in the Illusion. Now, we're going to use kind of the same format we have for the last several videos, and that is to start off with a real short presentation and then get into a discussion about the presentation. Now, this week, we're going to talk about getting the good stuff. And just what is the good stuff? And why it makes a difference to get it. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about. And so part one is going to be a real short presentation, and then part two will be more of a discussion around the topic, getting the good stuff, and why that's important. So, pay attention, because we'll be going back to the presentation to remember some of the facts. Getting the good stuff. As we go through this presentation, I am not going to tell you specifically what the good stuff is. See if you can uncover this mystery as we go on. Below, in this model, are some things that could be the answer, but aren't. Money, education, prestige, and travel. All good things. But it's not what we're talking about at this time as getting the good stuff. What are the two ways humans come in to this illusion? That might be an interesting question to think about. So the two ways that humans come into this illusion are through the birth canal or by C-section. All life entering the illusion must come through the female energy. What does an infant need when it enters this illusion? Everything. Because it comes with nothing. Now, what does an infant need to survive and thrive? Gotta notice, these are two different questions. Now, we're going to look at needs that we have being in the illusion. The first need is physiological needs. Air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, and to reproduce. The next step, just the next step up, is the need for safety, for personal security, resources, employment, health, the ability to own property, And this is what's known as your basic needs. Moving up higher on this need process. Once we satisfy the basic needs, is that for love and belonging, to have friends, intimacy, a family connection. Once we satisfy those needs, then we have esteem, respect and self-esteem, status, reputation, and strength within community that offers freedom. And this is the psychological needs. Finally, a sense of self-actualization. Once we satisfy our basic needs and our psychological needs, there is a desire to become the most that we can be. And this is a self-fulfillment of all our needs. Now, if you look at this, and this is a pyramid, as you look at this pyramid, we have just developed Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs that we all go through. In his understanding, the primary goal of psychotherapy should be to integrate all of these of the self. Now, what does an infant need to survive and thrive? This is our therapeutic question for this video. And this is the end of part 1. Stay right there for part 2. I'll rearrange my office space and be right back with part 2. Welcome back to part 2 of Getting the Good Stuff. Now, from the presentation, we learned that there's only 2 ways for us humans to come into this illusion, and that is through the natural process of the birth canal or by a C-section. And that when an infant comes into the universe, into this dimension, it needs everything. We're kind of helpless when we come into the universe. So, everything needs to be supplied. Now, what are the things that need to be supplied to that little child? Well, you might think of a lot of stuff, and some of it was mentioned in the part 1, the presentation around water, all the physical stuff that you need, and a safety so that you feel secure, and all of that is supplied. But there's one thing that if you do not get enough of it, a minimum amount, you won't develop emotionally normal. Now, as you think about all the things a child needs, what would that one very important thing be that the child needs? It's the good stuff. And as you think about it, and I'm going to use the whiteboard, as you think about it, you would come up with a lot of stuff. But really, there's only one thing. And that is love. I'm going to put that down. Love. The child needs love. Now, love is a funny word. Love is a funny word because you can love your dog and your cat, if you're a cat person, and you can love your car, and you can love your house. So love is attached to a lot of things. But there seems to be an underlying knowledge that when you say love of a child, it kind of coalesces into a more meaningful phrase. So that's the kind of love we're talking about. Now, along with love, there's something else that is required also, and they're closely interrelated. And that is a sense of self-worth. A sense of self-worth. So these two things go together. Self-worth make believe that's worth. This is what we've been looking for. This is the good stuff. Good stuff. So you need that. The child needs it. The child needs it. Or there'll be problems in the future. There will be problems with the physical things of life and the things we thought might have been important, like money, education, travel. All those things are related to how well we do at this in the first 6 years of life. The first 3 years where a lot of this stuff's going on, and then the next 3 years, up to 6 years. The first 6 years of a child's life is all downloading information about family and culture and who they are and what they're going to be based upon how much of this they get. Now, where do they get this? Where does the child get the good stuff? Well, most of the time, they say, from the parents. So I'm going to put parents right next to that. So this is important. Parents supply the good stuff. Now the problem is there is all kinds of combinations of what we would say are parents or major caregivers. Now there are single parents, there are unmarried parents, there are adopted parents, there's extended family parents. There's all kinds of combinations of this. So this is a little tough. So when you have a child who is looking for the good stuff, it's kind of an inherent thing. They know when they're getting the good stuff. And so when you have a child and you have parents, what's that combination called? You're right. I'm going to guess you. I'm going to guess what you're going to say. And so you're right. That combination is a family. Now you got a family. Now, a funny thing about families, none of them are the same. Now, you might think about the family that you were raised in. Was it the same kind of family that your significant other was raised in? And you're going to say, no. Two different sets of parents, different parts of the country or the city or wherever you were. All kinds of stuff like that. So, families are all different. Now, here's the other thing that's difficult to understand. The family your siblings were raised in were different than the family you were raised in. Oh, you might not have thought about that. Things change and evolve, and it's always in balance. The family is always in balance. Different parts of the family take on different structures to keep it in balance. They take on different scripts within the family, called family scripting. It's like a play. It's like when you come into the family, you're given a script book, like a playbook. And based on birth order, not always, but most of the time, you will have a certain role to play within the family to keep it in balance. So each family has a system of operating. System of operating. So basically what we're talking about now, we're talking about the good stuff, getting the good stuff within the family system. Now to do that, the child needs to get the good stuff. And as best it can, in all those combinations, it'll do the best it can to get as much of the good stuff as it can. Now, how do they do that? How did you do it? Now, I want you to keep in mind that we're talking about a very young age group, between birth and 3 years old, and 3 years old to 6 years old. Most of us, on a conscious level, are not going to know what we did to get as much of the good stuff as we could. Now, when you get a little older, closer to 6, you say, well, to get the good stuff, I cleaned up my room and I did helped with the chores. And no, you didn't do that. If you have any kids at all, or if you've looked at kids, when they're 2 and 3 and 4 years old, they're just playing and picking up their blocks and stuff. And that's what not gives them, that's not what gets them the good stuff. They do a certain behavior. So we got to talk about behavior. Behavior. The child will learn if they do certain things, they'll get appreciation from their major caregiver. Sometimes when Daddy comes home and they just toddle over to the door and they look up at Daddy and Daddy picks them up, gives them the good stuff. So then they have a habit to get the good stuff. They perform a certain function or a certain act, and they get physical attention. And they'll do it again. And they'll do it again. And they'll do it. You know why they're doing it? It feels good to get the good stuff. And so, when you do things over and over and over, what's that turn into? You're right. A habit. So from childhood, to get the good stuff, you have developed habits. Of behavior. Habits of behavior. You don't recognize it. But underneath your personality, holding it kind of in place, are habits of behavior you put in place when you were 2 and 3 and 4 years old. They're still there. And that's why when you go to family get-togethers, you walk into the family get-together at a very mature age now, and you revert back to your habits of behavior. You don't recognize it. It's changing hats. You change hats all the time. So, this is where we're at. Okay? Every family is different. Every time a new sibling comes into the family shifts and adjusts to the new sibling. Every time a family breaks up and forms several splinter groups, it again has to readjust. So this is why for a child going through some of these traumatic events at a very young age are so traumatic and affects them. Sometimes for a little bit, sometimes forever, because they don't know how to deal with it. So as we go along with this, I'm going to write on the board a statement, and then we're going to talk about it. And you're going to see if it makes sense or not. So here's the first statement. What you live with, you learn. Make believe this is learn. I know I wrote it a little small, but when I put it on the video, I'll put up at the top, I'll put the phrase. Now, we're going to approach this a little bit different. First of all, what you live with, you learn. Does that make sense? Now I'm going to ask you, what is the first job you had outside of the home where you made some money? Wasn't connected to the family, doing stuff for the family. Outside the home where you made money. Now, sometime 12 to 15, somewhere in that area, you did something. Now in the olden days, when there was a lot of newspapers around, kids delivered papers. That was a lot of the first times, yeah. Another one was babysitting. So there were some jobs outside of the house where you could make some money. And wasn't that nice? It was part of acclimatizing you to be a productive member of society. So, but when you do that, now you pick delivering newspapers. You usually bought the route from your older brother or some other kid in the neighborhood. And 60, 70 customers delivering papers was not uncommon. But each one of those customers had specific requirements that you had to learn. Where they wanted the paper put, when was a day to get paid, all kinds of stuff. The same thing with cutting grass. Cutting grass was another one. And some people liked it cut straight. Some people like it cut on a little angle. Some people wanted you to rake it after. So you had to live in the environment and learn what was required. You had to do that. Now the thing that we're looking at right now is, though, this part, family system. Out of your family system comes your personality. Out of your family system comes who you're going to be. Now, if you don't get enough good stuff, it's going to be problematic. If you get too much good stuff, it's going to be problematic. So this is a balancing system. Now, looking at this phrase, what you live with, you learn. What'd you learn from the family? What'd you learn from being in the family you were in? And usually at this time, they say, well, I learned to do good in school, and I was in sports, and they like that. Too old. You have to go back to where your programming was put in place. And when was that? Between birth and 6 years old. You see? And you're not going to remember. Not all of them. By 6, your core belief system's in place. Your core belief system is how you understand the world operates. And it will be your underlying belief until you change it. And most of the time, we don't know how to change it. We don't even know it's there, but it runs our life. Now, we have the first of 3 statements. What you live with, you learn. Pretty straightforward. Well, let's put the second one on. What you learn, you practice. What you learn, you practice. You can't practice what you didn't learn. You can't. You can't practice what you didn't learn. Where's your learning? through this, through your family system. And you think all those other things, well, in school and in high school, and well, I learned a lot of stuff. Yeah. But it rests on what you learned here. When working with the military, you find the same thing. PTSD is they're looking at stuff that some military do some crazy and wild things. But it's built upon this background. And that's how they understand it. They will look at what they were doing in the military and not realize that how they are perceiving it is because of this. Now you get two guys go through the same experience in the military. One of them gets PTSD, the other one doesn't. What's the difference? It wasn't the experience they went through, it was the same. It was the background they were putting it into. It was the background they were resting it on. So when you work with PTSD, in the long run, you're going to work with this. An interesting concept, and one that is lost so many times in working with the military. Now we have two of them. What are you practicing? What are you practicing? Because what you learned, okay, you practice. What are you practicing? That's how you get your habits of behavior. You get them started, and then from your learning, and then you practice them. Because you can't practice what you haven't learned. So, now, see how much time. Oh, great. Now, the third of our statements. What you practice, you become. Now this isn't news. I didn't make this up on my own. This is known for a long time. When you practice anything, basketball, you practice, you become a basketball player. You practice bullying, you become a bully. Because you're doing it over and over, and what you practice, you become. You think this stuff is all, it all ties together. There's a system behind everything. Cause and effect. Well, we talked a little bit about that. Cause and effect is the second Hermetic principle of the universe. Always works. Everything that is an effect has a cause. And what you learn is an effect of being in the family system. And what you practice is a result of what you learned. And what you become is an outgrowth of what you've been practicing. You see, you think this is brain science. Oh, psychologists. Oh, that's brain science. That's not. Now, the other thing, the last statement. What you become has consequences. Has consequences. What you become has consequences. Now, how are these expressing themselves? See, we often think that consequences are bad. No. There's a lot of good consequences in stuff that we do. It's an outgrowth of what we do. And some of those consequences are very meaningful and very appropriate. It's the ones that give us problems that we need to change. So if we look at the ones that give us a problem today, you can follow this all the way back to, and we won't believe it. We won't believe that this system caused us harm, caused us disappointment, caused us to live our life in a less than amenable and meaningful way. We don't think, well, my parents wouldn't do that. They don't know they're doing it. They're just operating on their system that they came out of. And we're all dancing together. And the neat thing is, once you begin to recognize the underlying systems, the underlying causes, you can make magnificent changes in a very short period of time. But you have to be willing to give up what you've been practicing. You have to be willing to change your past and see the world differently. And that's problematic for a lot of people for two reasons. One, they don't know how to change the past. And two, they don't think there's anything wrong with it. So they blame themselves all the time. So, that's where we're at now. This is the good stuff. This is why you need a minimum amount of this sense of love and that you have value, just in being here. And the infant can't do anything. Doesn't matter. It still needs a sense of value, of worth, or they get stuck and their world becomes dark and it's hard to go through. So when we get together again, we'll talk a little bit more about all those underlying systems that you're not aware of, and all those underlying things in the past that are now memories, and how to change them. This is an illusion, and nothing's real in the illusion. Nothing in the illusion is what you think it is, but you'll think it is until you begin to recognize you can change and let go of what you don't need. Can be a problem. So, we'll have some more fun next time and talk about some different things. So be good to yourself. Have fun. See if you can see the world differently. And we'll see you next time we get together. Bye now.